when the people out in your communities are looking for help or looking for people with good ideas, you can help lead the way with fresh eyes in a way that very often, so here's what I see most often, Renda. An organization shows up, they call us or they call the schools or whatever, because they're looking for hands. We got 280 schools, 27,000 kids, almost 260,000 alumni. And that's a lot of hands, isn't it? So if you're wanting to do something and you want a lot of people to show up and do it, that's a pretty good place to call.
You mean they're just looking for volunteers?
Sometimes. But when we engage them and say, that sounds great, but what if we could put somebody to working with you, or a group and team working with you, to take this thing that anybody can do. It's not bad at all to go and volunteer and clean stuff up, paint stuff, pick up trash, whatever it is. That's not a bad thing at all. It's a great thing. But what if we could give you a team that can help you think of better things to do so that there isn't that trash, the things don't break down, the thing that you're trying to solve doesn't become a problem again.
Innovation?
Innovation. Magic happens. Because very often they're so used to doing the thing that they do that they don't really think about, should we step back and look at it differently? So good example, Monticello High School. They were working with the local animal shelter. Sounds like a good project, right? They're going to take pictures of the kitty cats and puppy dogs. They're going to put them up on a website. And going to get people fluffy critters. They're so cute. And they were going to get people to adopt them. And they got there and they discovered that the animal shelter was not good looking. It was cages of animals, and the puppies and kitties weren't as cute as they could be. What'd they do? Those students sat down and they designed a new one. They designed a new one that had some really innovative things about the way the water moved around so the insects wouldn't get on the animals and make them sick. They designed some things so that they could be better. And if you do that, then it's not only easier to adopt them, but it's easier to take care of them the way that they needed to, right? Well, guess what? They didn't have money to do that. When you have a design, you got a plan, you got a vision, and you can help work together, you can go find people that are interested in that. And there you go.
So thinking about that, I'd love for you to share the story, how many times do you have somebody, an organization wants you to help pick up trash, right? Help you recycle. You want to share the story of the Malvern students with recycling and the computer recycling?
Yeah, okay. So, I'm going to try and make sure I get this right.
It's been a few years.
Yeah.
It's early.
Did you know that there was a law in the state of Arkansas that said that if a school bought a computer, because they're big expensive things, if a school bought a computer and they needed to, and it replaced another one, they couldn't give that computer away because they were afraid if they did that people would be wasteful and give it to their friends. And they get free computers, right? Well, there are a lot of people in this world who don't have things that they need, basic things that they need. They don't have access to technology or the internet or whatever. And over here in this warehouse are all these computers that nobody needs because they've been replaced. And they're not bad. They're just not as useful as they could be. And the students could reload a different operating system. They could clean them up. They could get all those things out, but they couldn't do anything with them. Those students began to work with their school district, which didn't want to pay to have to house all these computers because they couldn't do anything with them.
There's a lot of paperweights.
It was. But they had to change the law. And anybody here know how to change the law? You got to call the people that can make that vote, right? You got to make your case, you got to explain it, you got to do all of these sorts of things. So these students started out with this idea that they needed to figure out a way to help other people get computers that they could use. They found a place where they had all of these things. They had to work with the school district, which was wanting to get rid of them, but said you can't, the rules. Then they had to go talk to the people that make the rules to convince them that that was a good idea, and bang, guess what? There's a new law.
Mm-hmm. Truly, truly changed the law. So thinking about schools, thinking about how our students, our East students have been able to change the world, let's take a little dive into history. Let's talk about the internment camp and the difference that has been made there.
One of the things I want to encourage you is they do this when they teach improv acting. It's yes and. If somebody comes to you with an idea, don't just say no. Say okay, and. The project I want to talk about real quick is a magical example of okay, and. Students in McGee, Arkansas, in the high school, went to a training class at our offices on computer-aided drafting and design. And they met some middle school students. I'm to set up the dynamic right, high school, middle school, right? They met some middle school students that seemed to be a little bit better at what some of the stuff they were trying to do. Their facilitator, the high school students' facilitator, had their kids call up to that middle school in Little Rock, not in McGee, and said, hey, could you help? We're trying to design this thing. And this thing just happens to be one of the most significant pieces of American history, if not Arkansas history. Because down in South Arkansas, there were 2 internment camps for Japanese Americans. Because when the Second World War came around, a whole lot of people, especially on the West Coast, got told about 2 days' notice, I need you to pack everything you have in this one cardboard box. I need you to get on a train and we're going to make you move somewhere else. And a really good place to make you move if you were Japanese American back then was Arkansas. You want to know why? Because if you got out, they'd find you. Because nobody looked like you. So there were 2 camps. It's not a good story, that part of it. It's terrible when the government makes the people who are part of the government go get locked up just because they look different. And so these kids were trying to preserve some of this story, because when it was all said and done, they let those camps fall to pieces because nobody really wanted to do much with them. Well, the students in the middle school they heard that story and went, what the heck? And so they decided they wanted to dig into that story more. They wanted to tell more of that story. So they began to do research. That sounds exciting, doesn't it? They began to look into it. They began to pull together some information, and they wound up finding a group of people in California who were children in those camps, and they had they were much older now. And in their retirement, that's what they were doing. They were going around telling this story, mostly in California because that's where they lived. And these knuckleheaded kids in a middle school in Little Rock, Arkansas, called them up and said, hey, can we talk? The next thing you know, they're coming here, and they're sitting for interviews. Those students interviewed a man who served in the European theater in some of the, I think he was in 4 or 5 of the big battles that you see in the history books. He served in the greatest army group you'll ever hear about, because nobody does, the 442nd. They wouldn't make that movie because nobody would believe it. They interviewed him 2 months before he passed away. They finally got his story. When they got done, they had this little bitty, 17-minute video that the very next year was an anniversary in Little Rock, Arkansas for the internees. So a whole lot of people came in. And it was almost embarrassing because there was a university that had gotten a big grant. They made a whole movie. Okay? About an hour and a half long. And they were taking you through everything. This 17-minute film the kids had put together. There was a line around that hotel waiting to get in. And you do not understand what you're doing until you get there. Have you ever been in one of these projects or worked on a project and then gotten face to face with somebody that you actually helped? Do you have any idea that's a great feeling, isn't it? I'm standing in the back of the room, and a little bitty old lady just gasped from the second row where they got them seated. That's me. And I tell that story sometimes to talk about how I wound up standing between Mr. Sulu and the first senator from the great state of Hawaii, who's one of the greatest American heroes ever, Purple Heart winner, amazing man. I'm standing right between them, and I'm explaining to them, you need to go talk to these kids. And they're like, okay, let's go. It was special. And even all these years later, those kids remember that, and the children of a lot of those internees remember that. I'm going to leave you with this because it's kind of sometimes you don't even know everybody you're impacting. Somebody was talking to me about that, and they said, here's the thing. So many of us, when we left, just made this go away. We didn't talk about it. And then we got old, and our kids didn't know about it, and we didn't know how or if anybody was ever going to tell our story. And they're crying because they found a bunch of knuckle-headed middle schoolers in Little Rock, Arkansas, who had no reason to care. But they cared so much that they captured them and told that story.
So speaking of telling history stories, let's take it over to the other corner of the state, up in the northeast corner. Let's talk about the air base up there.
Anybody from Armorel here? Anybody from the northeast corner? Okay. The air base in Blytheville was a big deal a long time ago. I would say in the Cold War, but we may be back there, so we're not going to do that. But it was a big deal. It was a strategic air command base. And then when they basically decommissioned it, you know what it became? A whole bunch of land.
With a lot of concrete.
With a lot of concrete. It takes a lot of concrete to land those big old B-52s. And so when they got together to try and figure out what to do with it after it had sat for too long, they threw that off to some East students and said, what should we do? Those students helped design and come up with the beginnings of a plan to turn that into what they call a mixed-use facility. Residential, commercial, historic, the museum, all these sorts of things. But they knew that that wasn't their job, right? Because they're in high school. It's not their job to go figure out what to do with 7,000 acres. I don't know what it is. I can just keep making up numbers here, Renda.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Or to recruit the businesses, or to build the subdivisions. But they did want in on the museum. So you know what they did? They put together the advisory group and said, you take it. And that advisory group was business leaders, government leaders, military people, all these sorts of things. And they were led by high school students. And then when it got to the right point, they backed away and said, now, we want to do these things. We'd like to do some GIS work. We'd like to continue to help, but it's not ours to take anymore. And there you go.
Mm-hmm. All of this to say, Matt and I really wanted to do this discussion today to share some of these stories because this is what we want to see you guys doing.
Absolutely.
Because we know that you can. You guys have all the power to make these kind of changes in your own homes and in your own communities. That last little bit there, these students started that advisory group. Matt, I know as a CEO, quite often you're invited to be on some boards and serve for some other nonprofits and stuff. But I also know it's helped you to grow personally.
Sure.
I wondered if maybe you would share some of your story of how participating in something like that helps you and helps our organization.
Well, I get a lot of phone calls because of what you do. I really, really do. And for some reason, people think I know stuff, and I really, really don't. Okay? I wind up in rooms talking about things. I have no idea what the heck they're saying, so I just nod a lot. Oh, that sounds interesting. Okay? And when that happens, one, I'm really proud of what we do as East. Okay? An initiative, not just our organization, Renda, but as an initiative. I'm really proud. Because when people believe that you can do anything, that makes you feel good. And I'm telling you right now, people believe East can do anything. Because we've been asked to do the craziest things.
And East doesn't just mean you and me.
No, East.
East.
Yeah. Have your facilitators talked to you anything about something, I don't know, you might have created this one, the cash in your pocket? Have they talked to you about that? When I go there or when I serve on these organizations or these boards or those sorts of things, very often I'm trying to be a good representative for you, so please give me some grace if you hear I did something dumb. But it's also a place where I begin to meet people and visit with them, and I begin to find out what they care about, and I meet a lot of really, really cool people. And when we wind up going out into the schools or when we see other things going on, very often I can tell somebody, you know, you should call this person. Yesterday, one of the presenters, East alum, she was talking about, she's now in Los Angeles working for one of these big sports outlets, et cetera, et cetera. She was talking about to me about how she's been writing scripts and stuff for these people you see on TV all the time, okay? And she was talking about wanting to do a little bit more, and I said, I don't know if it's ever going to help you, but you're in LA, right? She's like, yeah. I said, well, I'm not going to get into all of it, but let me tell you, I know Squidward Tentacles if you ever want to reach out and talk to him, because he's in Burbank. She's like, what? Like, I know Squidward. She's like, how do you know Squidward? Well, I know Squidward because he married a woman who did some films for us in the early days. And I was at Squidward's wedding, which is weird. It was amazing. It was beautiful. It was fantastic. People were crying. The bride was lovely. But it was weird because when the power went out and he turned around and he was just a guy, and then he went into that voice and I went, oh. And I sit in organizations or I go to meetings and I meet all of these people who do all of these things. And when you're meeting with community partners, when you're talking to your teachers, your facilitators, your parents, this is a really good opportunity to ask them who they know that knows the thing. Because if you're thinking that way, where can I find the resources to do this? Where can I find the answers? Where can I find the people that make these decisions? Do you want to know who knows your local legislators? The people at your school. Mm-hmm. You want to know why they're not unapproachable? Because they're just people in your community. Now, if you go down to Little Rock, when they're all in session, it's really hard to talk to them because they're running from place to place. They got people around them. But when they're back home, they're just people. They're at the grocery store, they go to church, they get the gas just like everybody else, right? And so when you know people that know people, pretty soon you know people. And then you can be a person that knows people and connect other people.
Would you ever want to see some of our East students sitting on boards? Or our facilitators?
Nothing tickles me more. As a matter of fact, we see that all the time. What I'm going to encourage you, when you take on community projects, one of the things that I love about East is you don't necessarily get a grade and call it finished, right? I've seen so many students find their passion, their purpose, find their path through the projects that they get involved in. Student that wanted to take on problem of homelessness in Northwest Arkansas winds up organizing a thing where there's homeless for a day, which isn't nearly the same as being homeless, but it struck him so much, the work that he was doing, that he continues to do that. That's not his job. That's his passion. That's something that he wants to make a difference in. We see students get appointed. We see students become part of these organizations, either as volunteers or eventually perhaps as full-fledged, what you call members or staff members or whatever, and I think that's a great thing. When you find those opportunities, take advantage of them because it helps build what you do. Very many of you, how many of you are juniors or seniors? Okay. All right. When you're looking to take those next steps, and they want to see what you've done, do you think that they care more about 3 things that you have done all the way, or 150 things that you showed up to a meeting, got your name on the list, and got a picture in the yearbook?
It's those 3 things.
I know it's those 3 things, because when you're sitting across the table from the people that make decisions about whether you're going to go to school there, whether you're going to get a job, whether or not you're going to go to a military academy, or what you're going to do when you sign up for the Army. You want to know what they want to know? They want to know what you do and what you understand. And when they find out the things that you've been doing, they're like, wait a minute, back up. I think I got a minute. I got a call from a guy in MIT one time. MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He said, I need to talk to you. I'm like, oh no, what'd I do? He said, what did you do? You ruined my class. I've never been to Massachusetts at that time. I hadn't. And he's like, now, here's the thing. I walk in, because every kid in my class is the best from wherever they came from, because they made it into MIT. He said, I made it into, so I walk in, and I scratch some stuff on the thing, and I'm like, today, and I'm like, oh, I've got to go, and he leaves. He said, I wait 30, 45 minutes, and I come back in. It's all theater, because when I come back in, and they're all sitting there with their number 2 pencil sharpened up to an infinity point of sharpness, and their brand new notebook, and they're waiting, because they're waiting for me to tell them all the answers. My point is, you can't do that. You got to go find your own answers. He said, Mr. Dozier, I came back in yesterday, and they were clumped up in 5 groups. They were already working through the thing. They were digging through the textbook, and they were doing this, and they were doing that. And I said, what is going on here? And this little girl just sticks up her hand and says, excuse me, sir, you said that we needed to work on that, so we're working on it. And it wasn't like 2 plus 2. It wasn't like who won the Battle of Ronesburg or anything. It was like something Goodwill Hunting stuff, you know. And he said, who told you to do that? She said, nobody. I just thought you wanted us to do it. He said, where did you learn to do that? She said, I was in East. He said, what the heck is in East? He said, Mr. Dozier, I don't know whether to be so proud of you because it's finally happening, the thing I've been dreaming about my whole life, or be mad at you because I got to figure out something else to do first day of class now. And I said, well, you just good luck with that. Y'all keep MIT in and making the world a better place.
So, making the world a better place. What do you hope for the future of East? What do you want to see? Where do you want us to go? Because we're all going to go there together, right?
One of the things I'm most excited about, one of the things I'm seeing here at the conference, and those connections that Renda's talking about, they're not just between student groups and the community. They're between student groups and student groups, schools and schools, communities and communities. And when you get there, you can really make major change. And so I really would like to see us continue to grow this idea of connection, this idea of cash in our pocket. You guys know Renda. Do you know what Renda is capable of? Neither do I, because I haven't found the end of it. She's smart, she's passionate, she will fight, kill, or die if she believes in it. And if you call her and she thinks that's a good idea, she's going to be in my office until I give her 3 names, two ideas, or money. And she doesn't quit.
I don't ask for too much money. Come on now.
But if we continue to build on this idea of working together to do things and not making it about do I get a grade or do I get done, but making about what changes can I make.
Positive changes.
Amazing, amazing things can happen. We work for a nonprofit. Woo! Actually, it's the best job in the world.
It is the best job.
You want to know what the job of every nonprofit is? It's to go out of business. It's to do the thing that they set out to do. We're mission-based. And we would love nothing more than to find ourselves in a position where what we believe, this idea that students should be self-directed, they should have access to the things, the tools that they need, and the right tools and the best tools to take on, to learn, to grow, and to serve in their communities, to work together and learn to collaborate. We believe if we could get to a place where that's the way not just school but the world work, we'll go do the next thing and be proud of what we have done, because y'all will take it from there.
it would mean that we would change education
Yeah.
completely.
You change
our
education, you
goal.
change the world. And I guess the other thing, innovation. Just keep thinking thoughts nobody's ever thought. Keep doing things nobody thinks works that way. Because when you do, people start to follow you. People start to follow you. You learn that leading is actually about making new leaders, right?
It's true. Very true.
And there it is.
So I'm curious. I've gotten to ask Matt some questions. Do any of you have some questions that you'd like to put past the guy here? Yes, ma'am.
Why did you join us?
She asked, why did he join East?
Well,
There's a story.
it's a happy accident. I was a speech and English teacher, and I wanted to die a speech. I probably will die a speech and English teacher, okay, because it never kind of leaves you.
I was gonna say, you don't stop that.
But my vice principal brought me two pieces of what was turned out to be a 7-piece two pieces of paper, what was a 7-page document. Said, I need you to read this. I'm like, okay. Next day I came back. She's like, what'd you think? I'm like, I didn't understand any of it. Remember I said, people wind up pulling you into things and they're like, hey, what do you think? I'm like, I don't know. Sounds great. Picture's pretty. And she said, would you like to go and take a look at this thing up in Greenbrier? And I said, sure. So we got in a van with a group of us from my school, just like many of your schools did. We went and took a look at this thing that they were doing and went, oh, this is cool. And we got back and my principal said, what'd you think? I said, well, it was really interesting. I'm not sure I understood it all, but it was really amazing. He said, should we do this? I said, I guess. He said, do you want to teach it? I said, oh, no. He said, why not?
Scared.
I said, I don't know anything about computers. 24 years later, I still don't know anything about computers. But it has been such an amazing thing. And I believed that what I was seeing was something everybody needed to do. And if I failed spectacularly at trying to do that, at least I tried. Turns out we didn't fail. Because you're here. Yes, ma'am.
Let her bring
Okay.
the mic to you.
Okay, we got it.
That'd be great.
When you failed, what kept you motivated?
Great question.
That is a very good question. I don't know that we've ever failed, or maybe I think that they talk about that a
We
lot.
call it failing forward.
Yeah, most of the time, Rhea said it best yesterday, delayed, not denied. I mean,
Yeah.
in many ways, one of the things that I'm concerned about today is, why isn't East in 6,000 places? Renda doesn't want to make that many site visits, but there's this idea that, we really should be much bigger, and I agree with them. What keeps you motivated is that you know here and you know here. Because when those two things are talking to each other and agreeing, you know you're on the right path, that this matters. I know because when I see you in the 3rd grade, in the 8th grade, in college, in jobs, and when you come back, you have no idea the number of students that have come back just this week. I know that this is the thing that we're supposed to be doing, because I know that so many of you are helping each other find the way that you're going to go and doing things nobody thought you were going to do. You're going to do jobs nobody even knows exist. Some of you are going to make those jobs.
You're going to create them. Probably have time for one more question, and then I know we're getting pretty close to time for y'all, because you guys have other schedules to meet too, right? So let's get one more question.
How did you come up with the idea of East Conference and all the East schools coming together?
Okay. I'm going to swing back around to what we were talking about. I guess she asked about how East Conference, where that idea came from. We had seen other people's conferences and thought that's a really cool thing. We should do that. The thing that didn't work is most of the education conferences were about kids standing around looking real nice and being the kind of kids that said, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Meanwhile, their teachers were telling you all those wonderful things that they know and do. And we said, that's not how we want to do it. So we kind of did something different. And it got bigger than we could handle. And students stepped up. Maddie Bookout stepped up. Lindsay Parker stepped up, and we created a leadership team. We didn't create it. We just kind of recognized what was already there and said we should keep doing that. And maybe give them fancy lanyards and put them to real work and put a schedule on them. And we're still creating East Conference. You're still creating East Conference. You're still creating East. Because you're building the future. You've been doing it for a while. It's time you own it, recognize it, and do it the best you can.
Well, guys, I want to say thank you for coming to our session. And I want to say thank you for asking some great questions.
Absolutely.
And Matt,
Brenda?
thank you for taking a few minutes to sit down and do this.
Thank you
It's
for
awesome.
asking me. I run from place to place, and
It's nice to get him captivated for a minute.
it's nice to sit down.
It is.
I want
I'm
to
not
thank
gonna
you
lie.
guys for showing up. You have no idea. I said it yesterday. I've been saying it all week. We spent a long time waiting to get here today, and we didn't know if it was going to happen, but doggone, it's better than we even dreamed. Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. Enjoy the rest of the day. Take advantage of all of it.